19th century Europe. In museums, inside golden frames, paintings were shining. In those paintings, everything looked perfect. Faces were smooth clothes, were elegant bodies, were ideal scenes, felt like they were taken from dreams. Artists painted kings, myths, gods, and heroes. Art existed to serve palaces and power, and in that world it seemed as if there were no poor villagers, exhausted workers, mud-covered roads, hunger, pain, or the weight of real-life reality felt like the enemy of art. The academy and the system that ruled art repeated one idea. Art must be beautiful, art must serve the ideal, and for years no one dared to question it. But one day, amid all the glitter, the perfection, and the beautiful lies, a young man appeared. He had not grown up in grand halls. He had not dined at royal tables. His childhood was spent in a small provincial town, on dusty roads among fields and hills surrounded by farmers, fishermen, and laborers. He didn't see gods walking on clouds. He didn't see legendary heroes. He saw cracked hands, tired backs, wrinkled faces, people fighting simply to live. There were no crowns on their heads. There were no golden garments on their bodies. And one day that young man asked himself, why are these people not in paintings? Why does art only look at the rich? Where is real life? That young man's name was Gustave Courbet. At that time, Romanticism ruled art. Romanticism told painters, make life prettier than it is, turn suffering into poetry. Soften reality, hide the ugly corners of the world. Courbet chose the opposite path. He said, I will not hide reality, I will place it directly on the canvas. This was not just a stylistic choice. This was rebellion, because thinking this way meant rejecting the rules, challenging the academy, accepting that you will not be welcome. And Courbet made that choice willingly. When he arrived in Paris, they told him, paint heroes, paint gods, paint ancient legends. But Courbet looked around and said, I will paint what I see, not imaginary worlds, but real people. He painted funerals without heroes. He painted workers without glory. He painted life without makeup. And the art world was shocked. They were used to seeing angels on canvases. Courbet showed them workers covered in dust. They were used to kings. He gave them ordinary people. They were used to dreams. He gave them truth. Who was Gustave Courbet? To understand him, we must forget the image of the quiet painter working politely in a studio. Courbet was not quiet. He was not obedient. He was not a decorator for palaces. He was a storm. Gustave Courbet was born in 1819 in Ornans, a small provincial town in eastern France. He did not grow up among aristocrats or academicians. His world was built from fields, rivers, rocks, and working people. He watched life up close, not from balconies, but from the road itself. He saw funerals where nobody was heroic. He saw workers who returned home bent and silent. He saw real faces that had never been painted before. From an early age, he felt that he didn't fit into the world that society expected of him. His teachers told him to follow rules. His family wanted stability, but Courbet felt something burning inside him, a refusal to repeat what others had already painted. When he finally went to Paris, he came face to face with the official art world. Painters were expected to create noble myths, smooth bodies, and heroic poses. Success meant pleasing institutions, juries, critics, and the academy. Courbet looked at those paintings and felt only one thing. They were lies. They pretended to show life but avoided its weight. They avoided wrinkles, age, labor, poverty, and ordinary existence. Everything had to be beautiful, distant, perfect. Courbet made a decision that would define his entire life. He would only paint what he could see. He declared that if angels, gods, or mythic heroes did not walk in the streets with him, then he would not paint them. Instead, he chose the people who truly surrounded him: peasants, hunters, stonebreakers, grave diggers, ordinary women, ordinary men. This was not only an artistic choice, it was an ideological one. Courbet believed that every life had dignity, even those society ignored. By placing ordinary people onto massive, monumental canvases, he broke a sacred rule of his time. Huge paintings were supposed to be reserved for kings, battles, and legends. Courbet instead used this heroic scale for everyday life. He shocked critics. They called his figures ugly. They called his themes vulgar. They called his realism dangerous. But Courbet did not want to comfort them. He wanted to confront them with the world they refused to see. He was also deeply independent. He turned down titles and rewards offered by the state. He distrusted institutions and resisted being controlled by any authority, artistic or political. He believed the artist should answer only to truth, not to power. Courbet was not satisfied merely to paint. He argued, wrote manifestos, and defended his art publicly. His personality was loud, humorous, stubborn, proud, and fiercely free. Friends adored him. Enemies hated him. Nobody ignored him. Later in life, his rebellious spirit led him into politics during the Paris Commune of 1871. His opposition to power eventually cost him his freedom, his health, and his homeland. He was imprisoned, fined, and driven into exile in Switzerland, where he died far from the town of his childhood. But he never surrendered his belief. Until the end, he insisted on one principle: art must face reality. Today, Courbet is remembered as the founder of realism, the painter who changed the direction of modern art. Without him, the path to impressionism, modernism, and social art would look entirely different. Courbet was not simply a painter of peasants and workers. He was a painter of truth, uncomfortable, unpolished, unromantic truth. He forced art to leave the clouds and return to the earth. And that is who Gustave Courbet was. A rebel, a realist, a challenger of illusions, a man who refused to lie with a brush. The birth of realism did not happen in a single moment, nor in a single painting. It was not a peaceful transition, it was a collision. To understand how realism was born, we must first understand what came before it. For centuries, European art was dominated by idealization. Painters tried to elevate reality, to make it nobler, cleaner, more beautiful than it truly was. Heroes had perfect bodies. Queens never aged. Even death was staged like theater. Romanticism continued this tradition, but intensified emotion. It loved storms, ruins, tragic heroes, and dramatic, poetic sadness. Suffering became beautiful. Pain became decorative. Real dirt, real poverty, real struggle remained invisible. Then the world began to change. The Industrial Revolution transformed cities. New machines appeared. Factories rose where fields once stood. Crowds of workers flooded urban streets. Social inequality deepened. History was no longer only about kings. It was about masses of ordinary people. But art still looked away. Courbet refused to look away. He believed that if art ignored the people who built roads, mined stone, carried coal, dug graves, and buried their dead, then art was lying. And for Courbet, lying was unacceptable. He did something radically simple and therefore radically dangerous. He took everyday life and treated it as monumental. In the 1850s, he began to create enormous canvases, the same size previously used only for mythological scenes or royal battles, but filled them with ordinary villagers. No heroes, no gods, no kings, just people living and dying. With works like The Burial at Ornans, he broke the sacred rule of hierarchy in art. Critics were scandalized not only by what he painted, but by how seriously he treated it. A village funeral was shown at a size usually reserved for emperors and saints. To the establishment, this was almost sacrilegious. Realism was not simply painting realistically. Artists had painted realistically since the Renaissance. What Courbet did was different. He changed the subject of art. He declared that the lives of common people were worthy of history. He declared that truth mattered more than beauty. He declared that the job of the artist was not to flatter society, but to reveal it. The birth of realism was therefore both artistic and political. It questioned who deserved to be seen. It questioned who held power over images. It questioned why beauty had been defined by elites. Realism also rejected the idea that art must escape reality in order to be meaningful. Instead, it argued that meaning is found precisely inside everyday experience, in work, hunger, bodies, mistakes, and aging. Courbet himself said in different words, "Show me an angel and I will paint one." This sentence became a declaration of independence from imagination as authority. Realism did not deny imagination. It denied falsehood disguised as art. Realism's birth also coincided with the rise of photography. For the first time in history, images of the world could be captured mechanically without interpretation. Painters could no longer compete with photography in copying reality. So instead, they turned toward truth, experience, and social presence. Realism spread rapidly. Writers like Balzac, Tolstoy, and Dickens were doing the same thing in literature, showing real people in real conditions. Realism became a cultural movement, a new way of seeing, thinking, and judging. Courbet stood in the middle of it, stubborn and unyielding. He paid a price for this. He was attacked by critics, rejected by institutions, and mocked by polite society. But his movement survived because it answered a deeper human need, the need to be seen. The birth of realism is not just a chapter in art history. It is a moment when art turned its gaze away from thrones and toward the street. It is the moment when the invisible became visible. Thanks to Courbet and the artists who followed him, art finally asked, what does it mean to be human? Not as a legend, but as a reality. And it has never stopped asking since. The painting that truly exploded Gustave Courbet into history was not a portrait or a landscape. It was a funeral. The title was simple, The Burial at Ornans. But nothing about this work was simple. Courbet painted it in 1849 to 1850 after a real funeral in his hometown. The people in the painting were not invented. They were not idealized. They were his relatives, his neighbors, his childhood acquaintances. These were real people standing in real earth under a real sky. And that precisely is what shocked the world. The canvas itself was enormous, over 6 meters wide. Until then, such monumental scale was used only for history paintings. Kings crowned, battles won, saints ascending to heaven. Courbet broke the hierarchy of art by giving ordinary villagers the same visual importance as emperors. Critics looked at the vast canvas and asked, almost angrily, who are these people to deserve a painting this large? The answer was Courbet's revolution. They were human beings, and that was enough. There are no heroes in the painting. No one is posing beautifully. No one is bathed in theatrical light. Instead, we see men leaning awkwardly, old women praying mechanically, dogs sniffing the ground, people looking distracted, tired, confused, exactly like real funerals feel. Death is present, but not romantic. Grief is present, but not staged. The grave is a dark, open wound in the center of the canvas. This was the first time in European art that a rural funeral was painted with such brutal honesty. To the Academy, this was an insult. Viewers said the faces were ugly. They said the people looked common. They said the painting lacked spirituality. But Courbet's intention was the opposite of ugliness. It was truth. He refused to turn death into theater. He refused to dress sorrow in silk. He painted grief exactly as he had seen it all his life. Clumsy, silent, heavy, not poetic but human. There is also something else powerful in the painting. Emptiness. The sky is wide and gray. There is no divine light breaking through the clouds. No angel descends to comfort anyone. The only cross in the painting stands tall and distant, almost overwhelmed by the weight of the living. Courbet doesn't deny religion. He simply refuses to use it as decoration. The real drama is not occurring in heaven. It is occurring in the eyes and bodies of the villagers. The scandal grew when the painting was exhibited in Paris. People expected a sermon. Courbet gave them a mirror. Some critics accused him of attacking tradition. Others accused him of glorifying the uneducated poor. But the most unsettling accusation was this. They said he had made history out of nothing. And yet that was exactly his point. History is not only written by kings signing treaties. History is also the burial of a farmer that the world will never record, except in paint. The burial at Ornans announced the birth of realism more loudly than any manifesto. It dared to say that ordinary life is worthy of monumental art, that dignity belongs not only upward toward power, but outward toward people. Today, the painting hangs not as a scandal, but as a turning point. It marks the moment when art stopped pretending and started witnessing. It marks the moment when the invisible became visible. It marks the moment when Gustave Courbet stood up and said, "This is my country. These are my people." This is reality, and he carved that reality permanently into history with a brush. Courbet's rebellion did not begin on the streets. It began inside him. From the moment he entered the official art world of Paris, he saw rules everywhere, written and unwritten. What to paint, how to paint, whom to respect, whom to imitate. He was expected to bow to teachers, to juries, to institutions that decided what counted as real art. Courbet refused to bow. He was not only a painter of realism, he lived realistically. He spoke loudly, laughed loudly, argued fiercely. He wore simple clothes and ignored etiquette. To some, he seemed arrogant. To him, he was simply honest. He rejected medals and honors from the state, saying that the artist who accepts rewards becomes a servant of power. When critics attacked him, he did not apologize. He challenged them openly in newspapers and salons. He insisted that no academy, no minister, no institution had the right to define his art. His greatest act of rebellion came when the official salon rejected several of his works. Most artists would beg to be included again. Courbet did the opposite. He built his own exhibition right next to the World's Fair in 1855. He called it simply the Pavilion of Realism. This was more than a building, it was a declaration of independence. Inside that pavilion, he hung the paintings the Academy had rejected and wrote a manifesto explaining his vision. He stood in front of the world and said, "I am not here to please you. I am here to be free." Courbet's rebellion was not the rebellion of destruction. It was the rebellion of dignity. He defended the right of the artist to choose subjects, to show reality without permission, to work outside the control of institutions. He believed art belonged to people, not to governments or aristocracies. His independence had a price. He made enemies. He was mocked, attacked, sometimes isolated. But he never changed direction. Even in his personal life, he resisted control. He refused to follow academic styles, refused to pretend, refused to hide behind polite lies. He lived with the same principle he painted with. Say what is true, even if it costs you. Courbet's personal rebellion is why realism was not just a style. It was a stance. It was a way of standing in the world and refusing to bow before illusion. And because he dared to live like this, he changed not only painting, but the very idea of what an artist could be. Not a servant of power, but a free witness to reality. If you reach this part of the video, it means you actually care about history, the real stories behind the names and paintings. If you enjoyed this video, do one small thing that helps us a lot. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. It tells YouTube that this kind of content matters, and it helps this channel grow so we can bring you more hidden stories from history and art. Your support takes only a second, but it keeps this project alive. Thank you, and let's continue our journey through history together.